Hey, today I'm going to walk you through the process of creating a Zap from scratch. I'm Jimmy Rose from jimmyrose.me, and this is another video about how you can automate your processes in your businesses to save as much time as possible. Now, this video is a bit different than normal. It's basically something I've never done before. It's a little experimental. Could go anywhere because basically I'm just going to try to create a Zap that someone asked me about. So my friend Pete Everett asked if it was possible to do a certain thing with Zapier, and I said, I don't know. Like is the case most of the time, you just play around with Zaps and you don't necessarily know what is and isn't possible. And it kind of requires some messing around and just thinking things through to actually create a Zap. I can sit here and say that automation is going to save your business so much time, and it will. It just requires a little bit of messing around. It's not all sunshine and rainbows to make this stuff work. So let's try and dig through and create this Zap that Pete asked for. I'll try and trim out the bits that don't really add value other than just showing my thought process of how this works. So the request was this. So it's a distribution of previous podcast episodes. So he's got an RSS feed for the episode. So this is a thing that's on most websites. If you don't know what an RSS feed is, it's basically a list of posts that have happened. So for example, on WordPress, you would end up with an RSS feed by default that has not all of the posts. Sometimes it will be limited to 10 or 20 posts. Then you can also have RSS feeds for different parts of your site. For example, a podcast. Most podcast things work on RSS, so there will likely be an RSS feed for podcasts. So that's a good thing to know at the beginning. But he wants one random one to be picked every day to go out on a schedule. So he just wants the title and the link of the podcast. So the blog post title in this case, or the podcast title and the link. Taking it to the next level, it'd be good to set an offset so he doesn't pick the most recent 5 episodes. Okay, cool. So we'll work on the first thing to start with. So basically we need an RSS feed. We just want to get a list. The main thing, if we're going to pick one from random, we need to get a list of all the episodes that have ever happened and put one of those into a sharing queue, whether that's with Buffer or Twitter or something. I might just use Twitter for this to keep it simple. But my hunch is that we won't be able to use RSS for this because usually it's limited to the last 10 posts. So if we have 20, if we need to pull out one from 20 ago, then it's not going to be possible. But the first thing I would need to check is if RSS for Zapier has a search step. So there are 3 types of actions in Zapier. But if I search for RSS here and open this app screen, Australian internet, huh? It's going real well. So you can see here there's triggers and actions. So given that there's no search, that means we're probably not going to be able to do what I wanted to do. I was thinking maybe we could just look at the RSS feed and pick a random number and grab that out of like maybe the 8th number. We generate a random number like 8 or 9, whatever, and it just picks the 8th item. We would have needed a search to do that, so it doesn't look like it's possible. So then I would think, how can we get a list of all the blog posts that have ever been on this site? And the only way I think that's really going to happen is with Google Sheets. We can have a spreadsheet where we've got a list of every episode that's ever happened. So I'm going to jump over to Google Sheets. Now, for some reason, that same section isn't here on Google Sheets. It's all the way down the bottom. So we've got actions, triggers, and searches. There's that thing I was talking about. So with Google, you can actually do a lookup on spreadsheet rows. And in this case, it's saying it finds a row by column and value, which I believe is going to cause a problem for us. But some other things you can look through here. So triggers. So this is what might trigger a Zap. So if a new spreadsheet row is added, you can do something. I think in this case, we're not going to need this because we want to trigger based on a new RSS item and put that item in the spreadsheet. So that's probably the one we're going to use here. So at this point, I'm going to jump over into my Zapier account into create a new Zap. And we'll call it, this will be part 1. I think we're going to need 2 Zaps for this. One to add them to the Google Sheet, and then one to randomize from that Google Sheet to a posting. So we're going to need 2 Zaps. And right now, I can pretty much guarantee the only trouble we're going to have is with the randomizing of the post. So it's very simple to trigger on RSS to add something to a spreadsheet. This is just because I've done it before, but I'll show you. So let's just say add new posts to sheet. You'd probably name this better if you've got lots of Zaps. And I'm going to look at RSS by Zapier. And I mean, we only have really one item there. So this is essentially what RSS is used for, is to just trigger whenever a new thing happens. So I'm just going to use my website in this case, content snare. Oh man, snare.com. And pretty much every single WordPress website will have this at feed. So I know that the URL will change for different podcast players. You know, if this, in this case, it is it will be using a special podcast feed that you would need to look up from whatever plugin you're using. But let's just pretend I'm doing it for blog posts at the moment. We don't need a username and password. We can leave that as default and go to continue. So I'm going to, it's just went and looked at that RSS feed and pulled in some items that we can use to test our Zap. So this is as if there was a new RSS item, like someone just posted a blog post just now, it's pulled in these items. So these are some previous posts. You can see that's my last one. So I'm just going to leave that. We'll choose that one and hit continue. We're going to add an action to add this to a Google Sheet. I'm going to pause and create a new Google Sheet just for this. Okay, so I've got a new sheet and let's just call it blog posts. Really simple. We'll give it some header items like, and you actually, if you remember, he actually asked, he only wants the title and link of the podcast. So I'm going to say title and link. Bold them just for our own sake and even freeze that so we can use it in the future. Zapier doesn't need that. I'm just doing that for my own sake if there's a lot of posts. So if I go back over to Zapier, I'm going to create an action to put that in. So I'll go Google Sheets. I'm going to create a row. Now, Google Sheets is quite nice in the fact that it will pull that one up as the first one. Yep, because I only just created it. It's smart enough to do that, which is handy. And I didn't actually change the name of the sheet. So it's just going to be sheet 1. You know, you might want to call that blog post, or if you were using this for multiple blogs, you could have different sheet names down here. I'm just going to leave it as that for now. And you can see it's actually pulled in title and link as our headings. So that's pretty clever. Close that guy. So the title of our blog post, we can just click here, and it's going to pull in the data from the previous step. So, well, look at that. It was smart enough to find title and the link. So let's say I wanted the full description of the post. It's there. You know, the date of publish. There's a whole bunch of other data that comes in from that item that it picked up in the RSS feed that's specific to the RSS by Zapier app. But yeah, in this case, I only need the title and link. So I'm going to continue and then send a test to Google Sheets. Look at that. There is our first blog post in the oh man, I feel like I'm drunk or something. I'm going to finish that and might put this in a folder and turn it on. And that is our first Zap done. So that was the very simple one. Now at this point, that does not need to be bold. At this point, you may realize that any historical posts are not going to be here, and that is true. So what I would do here is try to find some way of exporting all your old posts and putting them into here. That's a little bit beyond the scope of this because I'm just wanting to walk you through the process of creating Zaps. You know, if this was me, I'd probably put some extra information in there, like the publish date, just for my own records if I ever wanted to come back in and use this. For example, I use a Zap like this to record all the promotional activities that are done for each blog post. So every time one goes up, a Zap will add one to my spreadsheet, and then I've got a whole bunch of columns there like, have I done this? Have I done this? And all these promotional activities that I do on every blog post. But in this case, all we want to do is randomize some of these things. So now I need to try and work out how that's going to happen. So I'm going to jump back over to create a new Zap. And if you remember, we jump back over here. So he wants one to be picked at random to go out on schedule every day. So post a random, post a random blog. And every day, if we want this to be done every day, it's going to be on schedule by Zapier. And we can tick every day. But let's say I wanted this only to happen on Mondays. Just an example to show you how I play around with Zaps. Okay, we can say only trigger on weekends. So, okay, maybe if I want it on Mondays, I might need to choose every week. And there we have day of the week, right? So that what I'm trying to illustrate there is that it's not an exact science. You know, sometimes I'll just play around with the different options in here and see what's available to see if I can make what I want happen. So in this case, we're going to go every day. And I think that we won't do it on weekends. And the time of day, we'll do it at 8 a.m. That's a key point there relative to your time zone settings in your Zapier account. There's when this will fire. You can just click there to change them. And it's just created a time. It doesn't really make sense, I guess, that it's just created a random, it's like now, I guess. Yeah, it has. It's created the time as now, just so we can test this item. Now, of course, we're going to need a post at some point. So let's just say Twitter for now. I'm going to create a tweet from my Content Snare account. Check out this new post. And then let's say I'm going to have the title and the link in here. But we don't actually have that data yet, right? We don't have it from the spreadsheet. So I'm just going to leave that blank for now, and we'll come back to this later. So now we're going to need a step to, so basically right now all we have is every day post a tweet. So now in the middle we need to find a way to get that random post. So chances are there isn't going to be a way to do a random sheet. So if I show all of the options here, we've got creating rows. Obviously we don't want to do this. We've already got the rows in that sheet. We just want to find one, right? So I guess we're going to have to use a lookup spreadsheet row. If I just go through the steps now, same thing. I'm going to pick that same sheet. Now it's asking for a lookup column and a value, right? And so all we have here is a title and a link. So immediately I can't think of a way we're going to get a random one. Like my original thought was maybe we could have another step in here that generates a random number with Zapier, and then we just look up that row. So it looks like that's not really going to be possible. So we've got to find another way to do that. Now, I think I've done something like this before, but I've done it a different way. So I'm going to try something new. What I'd probably do here is see, every row in Google Sheets obviously has a number. And I believe there is a function that just gets that number, right? Yeah, it's equals row, bracket, bracket. So I'm thinking what we could do is every time one is added to here, we just use this function, and then we can just find the largest number. Actually, I say that like it's easy. I actually don't know if there's a way to just pick the largest number. So let's just pretend we've got something here. I'm just going to put a random few posts in, and let's see if this is possible. I have a feeling this might not work, but you know, this is how automation works. Actually, so check this out. So there's a bottom up search here. Search from the bottom of the sheet. In other words, pick the most recent match. So if we want to search from the bottom of the sheet, we could just have another random thing in here called, it could just be anything, right? As long as it's the same in every single row. Because what I'm trying to get here, remember, is this number, the largest number. So if I just have something that these are all the same, we could do a bottom up search for that thing, and it's just going to pick the bottom row. Potentially. So if I'm going to have to actually, I'll just put this here. Just call it a check mark or something. And this is the row number. Just so these come into Zapier. If I go back here now and reload this. So now we have the check mark. I want to look for a check mark of Y because they're all Y. And we'll do a bottom up search. And we do not want to create a row if it doesn't exist yet. So continue. If I do that, let's see what happens. So we did. We got row 4, which was facebook.com, which is the last post. So look at that. We've got number 4. That was the thing I'm really looking for. There is the last number. All right. So now we need to see if we can create a random number that's between 1 and that. So I'm going to create a new step here. And I believe this comes under formatter. Look. Okay, so we're going to perform a math operation. And let's see. There's no random. And I think I'm going to have to Google if it's possible to do random numbers in Zapier. So, you know, this is what it comes to sometimes. You have to actually just search around. Even though I spend so much time in Zapier, I don't know everything about it. So I'm going to have a quick little search, pause, and see what I can find. Okay, so I ended up on this formatter by Zapier, and I saw there was something about random in it. So I Control F, found rand. So look at this. We've got a random number between 2 integers. That is freaking perfect. And that is because we're going to know the minimum number in that sheet is 2. And the maximum number we've just got out of the other step. So all we have to do is get one that's between them. And then I would also wonder if rand between would ever act, whether that's inclusive or not. Like, does that actually include 2 and 4? Or is that only in between? So we'll be able to test that out. Oops, where am I? Here. Okay, and this actually became part of the formula step, spreadsheet style formula. So, looks like all I have to do is go back here, spreadsheet style formula, and go equals rands between 2 and, is that the right syntax? Where'd you go? Rands between min comma max. I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna pull in at that number we just looked up. It could use the row number, but may as well just use the ID. And continue. So let's test that and see what number we get. We got 3. If we retest it, we got 3 again. I have a feeling it's going to be not inclusive of 2 and 4. So if I'm just going to do, because it didn't actually say, oh no, there we go, we got 4. So it looks like it is possible. This is a very like non-technical way to do these things. There we go. Look, we've just proven that we can get 2, 3, and 4 out of this system. So in that case, this is going to be easier than I thought. This is great. So every day we've found the last row of the spreadsheet. We've created a random number that corresponds to this here. We've got a random number into that one. Now what we're going to do is look that up. So we're going to do another Google Sheets search. See, this search isn't really a search. It was pretty much just getting the last row. So it's, you know, in that case, I might actually rename this to like get last row. We kind of just did a little workarounds to get the last row in that sheet. You know, and there are so many different ways we could have done this. You know, like, for example, in the past, I have actually created another column here that literally just contains a formula, an Excel formula that, or a spreadsheet formula that would generate a random number based on everything that's in the sheet. And then you can do a lookup of like that column and just say get like row 2 or whatever, to get the value of that out and post it. So it's kind of a workaround, but I'm kind of glad we've done it like this. This is cleaner to me, I feel. So yeah, and sometimes you do have to have workarounds. You know, if there's no specific get a random row, you have to start mucking around and trying to work out how to do these things. So what are we doing? We're looking up a spreadsheet row. I'll speed this up. All right. Again, now all we're going to do is look up row number. Ooh, I just realized I made a mistake. Where did I use ID? If I turn that preview mode off, I used ID, which I should not have done. I should have used row number. That was actually our column name. Whoops. Continue. So I'm going to come back to where we were, and I want to look up row number, and I'm going to look up the random. So I'm going to choose numbers. Actually, I might rename this now. Choose get a random number. I wonder if that's actually changed in here now. Yep. So sometimes it's helpful to name your steps like this. There we go. Number 2. Don't need any of this other information. Continue. We're going to fetch and continue. Let's view the row that it got. Yeah, there we go. So we've got row 2, right? Tips to gather information. That's the one. We are in business on this, right? So now, if I go to create tweet, to edit template, I can click here to pull out that title. Oh, what just happened? I can pull out that title and put a couple of lines in and then put in the link. Done. Almost. Right? So if you remember, I made a few changes to this sheet manually, right? So I added this column and I added this column. So we've actually got a previous Zap that we created that isn't going to know what to do with these columns anymore. So I'm not going to send a test to Twitter because I don't want to tweet that. I'm going to jump back over to the other Zap. And here we are. So now I'm just going to quickly jump into here to fix this. So it's smart enough that it should keep the title and link the same. No, it's not. Look at that. It isn't smart enough, and this is why we have to test things. So now I'm going to have to move that link into the link step. I'm just holding Control A and Control X to cut and to paste into there. Now remember check mark, we just want it to be Y every time because we're just using that to look up from the bottom. And the row number, we're going to have to see if we can put a formula in here, and hopefully we don't run into any roadblocks on this one, because that's going to wreck everything I've done so far, which might happen. So let's retest. Send a test to Google Sheets. It should add that new row. Boom, it worked. The equals row thing actually did added a formula. it added our check mark. Obviously, that's a duplicate of that post, but in real life that wouldn't happen. That's just because I tested the same thing twice. But that shows that we are absolutely in business for both of these zaps to work. So this one is turned off because I made a significant change. That's what happens when you make, when you make a big change to a zap, it'll turn off. So I'm going to turn that back on. Leave it in my default folder. Now we are done. So if you can see that, we're doing a new item in feed. We're going to add it to our spreadsheet with the title and the link. We're using this as a workaround thing that we just happened to find, and a formula to get the row number. And I mean, this is where the magic happens, right? So every day, except weekends that we chose, we're getting the last row of the sheet, and then we're going to create a random number, and then look up that number using the lookup column that we created. And we're going to create a tweet. That's it. Then we just turn that on and we're good to go. But there's one more thing. Remember, he asked as a little bonus, be good to offset so he doesn't pick any of the most recent 5 episodes. So how do we do that? The way we've done this, that actually is really, really simple, because it was all done in this little random number thing here. So we're getting a random number between 2 and the last row number. So if he just said you don't want to do the last 5, you can literally stick a -5 in there. How awesome is that? We're done. Almost. There's a big issue in this, in that if that row number is 2 minus 5, it will probably blow this up, and it won't work. But I honestly would leave that in this situation, because if you don't want the last, there's very rarely going to be less than 5 in that spreadsheet, because you would paste all your existing blog posts in, and that from then on it's never going to be less than 5 unless you delete a bunch of stuff. And then if it was less than 5, why would you not want to pick the most 5 recent episodes? I mean, we could, a programmer would say that's probably dodgy, because we've got the potential to cause an error here. But I'll tell you what would happen if that causes an error by having a random between 2 and say -3. Zapier will just throw an error. It'll email you and say one of your zaps threw an error, and it just won't do anything. So you're gonna get that email, and you can work it out. Come back in and remove that -5. But look at that. We have done that way more easily than I thought we would. And yeah, I mean, hopefully that was easy enough to follow. I'm basically just that's exactly how I would have created this zap if someone asked me if this was possible, and I would start mucking around with things and start trying to piece things together. And then eventually we end up with some zaps that are going to do the original use case. So pretty awesome. Now, that could be an automatic social media scheduling tool forever. Now, another thing I'd recommend here too is we just used Twitter for an example, but I use Buffer. So in my social media, I might have that same post pushed into like 5 different locations. One on Facebook, one on LinkedIn, one on that, whatever. And then Buffer will time those to go out based on when it thinks is best. So yeah, that's it. Hopefully that was helpful. If you'd like to get some more tips and learn more awesome ways to automate your business, please hit that subscribe button below. I promise you not all the videos are like this and so intensive. I try to normally just focus on one really cool idea, because that is the biggest thing I get asked is with automation is I don't know where to start, I don't know what's possible. And as you just saw, the way you learn what's possible is just by mucking around with it and getting cool ideas from other people. So yeah, if you want some cool ideas, hit that subscribe button or head over to jimmyrose.me and sign up for the newsletter where I send out awesome stuff that I find. And I'll see you in the next video.